I guess first can you explain what it is you do in this field?
I work for a small consulting firm. It's a green tech consulting firm called Sabot6, and one of our main clients that I work with on a day-to-day basis is the Pentagon's Energy Security Task Force. That task force has been charged with reducing the use and transportation of oil and electricity in the Department of Defense, which is the #1 consumer of oil in the world.
What's it like working on that project right now? What's the experience?
It's exciting. There's a lot of energy and excitement, no pun intended, around reducing eliminating the strategic importance of oil, reducing the department's dependence on it, getting trucks off the road in Iraq and Afghanistan, so soldiers, fuel trucks off the road, so soldiers aren't dying from improvised explosive device blasts. So if you can make your forward operating bases and your installations around here more energy efficient, you don't have to drive as many fuel trucks in combat zones, things like that.
I guess, how new is this kind of project, and what's it been like trying to work to shift away from oil within the department?
Yeah, the task force was stood up in 2006. The group that I work with was stood up separately shortly after that, and so it's about 2 to 3 year effort, and 2 to 3 year old effort, and we've done a lot of work in Iraq. We're spray foam insulating tents in Iraq, which is basically, right now you're basically air conditioning the desert. You have a bunch of these tents with no insulation. You've got air conditioning blowing in both sides of them, and then it obviously goes right out, which is really fuel inefficient. So if you can insulate them with a foam on the outside, you can bring down the amount of air conditioning you need, and that in turn reduces the amount of fuel trucks that you need to bring in to the forward operating bases. That's a big. That's one of the first lead projects that we've done. It's that demand reduction piece, trying to get demand down in the Department of Defense.
So your button says future leaders for McCain. So what do you think of McCain's stances on energy and climate and environmental issues?
Right, and I will say that that everything I'm saying is not it's my own personal views and not those of the Department of Defense, and certainly not the McCain campaign. In my line of work, I'm passionate about energy, and as a future leader, I understand that's going to be a major issue when it's a major issue now, and it will continue to be a major issue as the future leaders here begin to take office, begin to become the business leaders, the lawyers, those sorts of things. And so coming here, talking about those issues, exchanging ideas is really important. That's the big policy aspect of it, and we're excited about what McCain's doing and saying on energy. It's not about any one thing. It's not just about drilling. It's not just about putting up wind turbines across the Midwest. It's about all of those things, and I think McCain's the one who's really articulating that well. We need a all is good type of approach, because energy is we're dependent on it for our economy, for our livelihoods, and those sorts of things.
And you mentioned relying on drilling. It feels like for a long time that's been kind of the sole message we've gotten, that's the answer. What are your concerns about that, and how do we start moving away from reliance on oil? You were talking about reducing that reliance.
Yeah, we really need to eliminate the strategic importance, and so drilling for oil is a short-term measure, and it's not going to solve the problem because we're still going to be using oil. So what we need to do is we need to break the monopoly of gasoline-only cars. Cars need to be able to run off of things like electricity, flexible fuels, biofuels like algae-based biofuels, corn-based biofuels, things like that. So you've got to break that monopoly on the transportation sector, and I think that's the big, getting some momentum for those non-fossil fuel ways of transportation is just so essential.
And what about McCain's climate plan? What kind of influence do you think that will have on guiding some of these things?
Yeah, I think McCain is really is really showing some leadership in this area. I think there's consensus amongst the party that carbon. The first question is what pollutes, and the environment is what are we polluting? In the air, and the land, and the water. And I think there's consensus amongst the party, just from talking with people, that carbon is a pollutant, that excessive amounts of it can be a bad thing. And so, McCain, I think, is coming up with constructive ways of how do you manage that pollutant. There's some discussion of the cap in the trade system, and using economic principles to reduce your market-based principles to reduce your carbon emissions. And I think that that has a lot of that's gaining some support. I think, and the Republican Party is in a great position to listen to the concerns of business while also using market-based solutions and finding a way, a win-win for both American businesses and families on the one side, and using market-based solutions instead of like mandates.
So it seems like a lot of younger people in the Republican Party are a lot more enthusiastic than some of the older folks. And what do you think that folks like you are changing the party on this issue, and that we'll be able to see more movement?
No, I think old and young want to make sure that future generations have both a healthy economy and also a healthy environment. And I think the conversation between the generations, if there is, I think there's consensus amongst that. I think the conversation between the generations is how do we achieve that? We want to move aggressively, but we don't want to move so aggressively that we damage that American promise, that dream of prosperity, for future Americans.